It really is thinking about acquisition and retention separately. Being focused on CAC is important, but are the margin dollars that I have before CAC sufficient for me to actually even absorb the CAC that exists in the market?
That's tough, because sometimes fixing this or figuring it out is not like a 2-week or a 2-month solution.
All right, we're back. Dylan, what's cracking?
We're talking about acquisition and acquisition problems today. So there's a gazillion different things that could go wrong here in terms of what could be causing acquisition problems to go wrong. But hopefully we can synthesize it into a few most common shared experiences and talk about it.
I got 99 problems and acquisition is one. That's what we're talking about today. Sorry, I had to.
The good thing is that everyone always wants a better ROAS.
Yeah.
So it's even if you don't have a problem, you may think you do. Most people think they do. So it's a fun one, that is for sure.
So before I start by asking you your take on something important, I want to just say that more and more what I find myself talking about as a CFO in the D2C space with brands, when it comes to like, how do I think about whether my marketing investments are driving profitability or financial benefit, it really is thinking about acquisition and retention separately, right? Whether that's measuring some of the different kind of systems that you use to run acquisition and retention separately, or it's some of the basic blocking and tackling, which both of our firms do, is new customer profitability versus returning customer profitability. But I just want everyone to hear this before we dive in. This is how you have to be thinking about things in your brand. It's different depending on what game you're playing in terms of what parameters you need to keep acquisition and retention performance within, but it is the lens through which you need to be measuring your marketing's financial performance. So what I want to start off with, Dylan, is what's your take on the most common actual acquisition issue that you see?
Yeah, so I would say that the most difficult one to solve is low LTV, high reliance on first order profit, and minimal diversification of offer. So like, I think that that's a tough situation to be in, and the solution there is probably start slashing OPEX and prepare to spend some time to fix your situation until you find a new winning offer. But for most brands, if you're kind of on the trajectory of you're spending more, and your acquisition margin in terms of contribution margin dollar is lessening, you have to start thinking about, how do I unlock the next kind of level of growth once I start saturating the current funnel? So that might be rethinking your offer to improve CAC to LTV. Different categories lend themselves to either worse or better ability to actually manipulate CAC to LTV. High LTV brands generally have the most flexibility because the initial welcome offer and how you set up your subscription funnel can have a huge kind of upside potential. But if you're not playing one of those high LTV games, you really have to think to yourself, okay, of all the channels I have that work, and maybe it's 2 or 3, how are you basically with aggression testing new products and new offers? Because you're going to likely need to have that diversification due to the fact that when you have low LTV, you're basically signing up for high variability in revenue over the long term if you do not get diversification in offer. You can also look to go to other countries and sell in different markets to try to, soak up some of the low-hanging fruit conversion volume. And I think that's an under-talked about opportunity. We work with a lot of brands that sell internationally, although the majority are selling predominantly in the States. Sometimes certain products can really have good efficiency and volume outside of the States. So those are some initial thoughts that come to mind, but more often than not, if you're only addressing it when it becomes an issue, that's tough, because sometimes fixing this or figuring it out is not like a 2-week or a 2-month solution. And the worst thing you can do, in my experience, and there are some bad agencies out there and bad media buying teams in-house, is I'll sometimes talk to a brand, maybe we're not working with them, and they're like, yeah, we've worked with 6 agencies in the last year and a half. No one's been able to solve our problem. And I would say to that, it's like, you're choosing to assign the success or the lack thereof your business is facing to a person who is not you. It is
Mm.
probably not the agency or the media buyer's fault. It's probably your fault. And that's maybe sounds aggressive or whatever, but that's just the truth. And it's not that you're not trying, it's that you haven't actually feasibly deployed the strategy that allows you to have the diversification you need or the upside you need. And it's way easier said than done. Sometimes it takes a year or two to find the next offer that can actually like get you to where you want to go. But you have to be very, very careful not to cycle through teams unnecessarily because there is a learning curve for all new teams. So
Yeah.
that's my take on this is like I find that people sometimes forget that the ecom is a product business and that's the biggest lever that you have. And especially for some of these like 7 low 8 figure stores, they haven't really reached escape velocity yet because they haven't really figured out the muscle that is new product and improving CAC to LTV over time. And that's where I see most brands get stuck with CAC issues.
I think most commonly, well, let's start at like, this isn't the driver of the issue, but this is like the warning light, right? Like the metric, the outcome that we see that's like, hey, we got an issue. It's like uncovering that acquisition is less profitable than the brand thought that it was. Like when we finally break out new customer versus returning customer profitability for the first time, they don't realize what that their new customer profitability is worse than they thought. And then when we dig deeper, what I see most frequently is that there just wasn't an intentional engineering of unit economics when they developed the product, right? To drive sufficient margin dollars per order to be able to cover CAC. So like they get myopically focused on CAC, which being focused on CAC is important, but they're myopically focused on CAC as a byproduct of having poor unit economics before CAC, right? And so they haven't asked themselves the hard question of like, are the margin dollars that I have before CAC sufficient for me to actually even absorb the CAC that exists in the market? Because generally speaking, like, yes, good tactics or good following best practices in growth marketing should yield a better CAC than not following best practices. But there's kind of a market level, there's a market CAC that you're going to experience to one degree or another, right? And so you have to actually engineer your unit economics to be able to sufficiently pay for that market CAC, all other things held equal. And so one of the things that we're helping brands uncover is like, do we need to like, what do our unit economics before our acquisition costs? What options do those even give us, if any? Because I think sometimes brands think they have more options with the gross margin dollars per order that they have in their unit economics than they think they have more options than they actually do. Does that make sense?
I think that there in our industry is continuing to evolve, and I think more and more brand founders are earning an appreciation that the durability of revenue is not as high as maybe some people initially thought of like
Yeah.
the initial consumer run up as Shopify got popular in the 2010s. And more you're having like better action being taken to try to increase durability via diversification and higher LTV. But I would say this as like a mental model. If I'm running a brand, I'm happy if I hit my end of year profit target. However, I'm unhappy if I did it, and I also did not see improvements in either AOV or LTV. And there's some exceptions to this, of course, because like sometimes you want to actually have AOV go down if you're high LTV. Sometimes like, there's other variables. It's almost like CAC to like lifetime contribution margin, but you should just assume that every year your CAC is going to go up. But at what you should probably like you can try to chart it. You should probably make like a bad assumption of what it is, meaning like bad as in like a worst case scenario.
Yeah.
And like you want to challenge yourself to improve the investability of your marketing funnel, because if you don't, at some point, like everything in business is generally a race to zero. Like you're always trying to compete to be better than the other business. And consumer is just like brutal for this because the barrier to entry is generally quite low, unless you have like some sort of actual moat in your business. But until you establish a real moat via vertical integration, like actual IP, what whatever you deem your moat to be, you really have to be thinking about, if I don't improve my CAC to LTV, someone else will, and I will eventually lose.
Yeah.
So I think that has to be like a greater kind of, focus. And I think that especially in like the 7 to low 8 figures, there's lots of businesses that can get to like 20, 30, 40 million bucks a year off of one core offer. And it's easy to just focus too long on that and not worry about what is the thing that's going to give me that next tier of growth and also provide that durability. Because sometimes it's just so easy to invest in the same thing that's already working. And
Yeah.
I think that is often the right approach in like very early stages. But I think sometimes, especially if you're not playing the high LTV game, people wait too long. Like, I would say this, instead of going and advertising on Snapchat, Pinterest, TikTok, maybe you should take some of those dollars and risk them on new products. I think that is probably a higher probability bet to increase the likelihood that your business has longevity and producing more profit and more cash flow. So that would be like my non-marketing solution to fixing when acquisition is a problem. Is I think if you want to fix it before it becomes a problem, that's kind of the pathway you have to take.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was thinking about this quote, or like this saying that Gary Vaynerchuk has. I don't follow him a lot, so maybe when I say this, like the people who like do follow him are like, yeah, Johnny says that all the time. I don't know, but like I was watching this vlog one day with him, and he was like, listen, you know how I scaled this, scaled his agency? He's like, because all I do is think about what my competitors are going to do to put me out of business, and then I go do that. And like, and he's just like, year after year after year, what are my competitors going to do that's going to put me out of business? And then I go do that, and I go do it myself before they do it. And I think that, look, D2C having a low barrier to entry is like both an advantage and a disadvantage, right? Like the advantage is you can spin up a store really easily and bring product to market at a pretty low cost. You can start a business with a pretty low, like, startup expense. But the drawback is anyone can do that. And so the ones that really figure it out and crush it, they know how to build durability. And yeah, sometimes it's something like IP, patents, trademarks, whatever. But what I see most commonly is the combination of strong product and really strong brand building, right? That like if the people I know who have started multiple ecom brands and crush it every single time, they see this angle on the product catalog combined with brand, right? And kind of this brand experience. And that's their durability without a patent, right? Their IP is the brand and product development. And so I think if you're going to build a...
And sorry, that's probably the biggest moat. The brand at its extreme is probably the best version of everything for the long term.
Totally.
But you have to pick a category that you can actually build brand into. There's some that are actually really hard to do.
Agree.
So,
well, yeah, and I mean, I think you have to think about that very, very intentionally, right? I think what the point is that there's intentionality behind it. It's not an accident. Now, not everyone knows the answers on the front end. You gain wisdom along the way as you make mistakes and you learn, right? But the reality is you do really need to be strategic about how solving acquisition in the long run is a strategic endeavor. I'd probably say more so than a tactical endeavor, or at least keeping those things running in parallel. I do have maybe a funny question for you, which is, what's the most common fake acquisition issue that you see? And when I say fake, something that comes up time and time again, that's just a misconception. Like, oh, you guys are doing this wrong, or this is being done wrong. And you're like, no, it's not that.
probably debating like targeting and media buying. It's just like so irrelevant. Like media buying is is practically fully automated now. And essentially what actually matters is like target setting in context to the financial goals you have as a business, and then creative. And the target setting in relation to goals is nuanced because you may have a different goal for every product, every week, every month, based off of the priorities, and actually making sure you're doing the right bids. But that's not really like media buying like it was like 10 years ago. Like, we're not talking about like picking which placement on Instagram we're doing, or like ABO or CBO. Like, none of that matters anymore. Like I guess you can like really mess it up, but these platforms are so automated now that you'd have to try really hard to mess it up. And the way you'd mess it up is by trying too hard. Like it's actually pretty simple. So the most common issue is trying to fix it with old school media buying tactics. And I think it's because when you build your business as a brand owner on the back of Facebook ads or TikTok ads, you kind of have this like reaction, or it's like a natural kind of relationship where if something is good or bad, you want to react with doing something in the ad platform because you know you built your business on it.
Yeah.
But there reaches a point in time where the human input diminishes so much in terms of what you can actually extract out of the platform that additional button clicking is unlikely to make a positive improvement. It's actually probably just more likely to produce like less. Like more and more these days, what we're thinking about is obviously the finance piece of forecasting and the creative piece. That's what actually matters, and the offer. But we're actually trying to help brand owners know when to not click buttons in Ad Biz Manager
Yeah.
because it's so tempting to feel like you have the ability to impact the outcome when you probably have very limited ability to, except for a few very key things. So that is the most common one, and the one that I see most frequently go the wrong way. Like don't talk about interests and lookalikes. There's maybe some exceptions, but like, man, just it's not. It's, even if it's an exception, like whatever. Like there's like just like focus on the levers that actually matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, the value in a marketing agency these days is in strategy and like
100%.
and stitching together the right process for your brand, right? And like certainly there's tactical button clicking that happens in that, but like the magic is really like, do we have the right like integrated
Yeah.
process across activities to drive the outcomes that we're looking for?
It's strategy and then operationalizing the deployment of assets against that strategy in a very cost effective manner, holding a high bar of quality. And like another example, like I was having a conversation recently about like a brand that was not doing it as well, and like the owner was talking about trying to revamp some of the creative processes they have internally, and like these things just rarely actually like move the needle. Back to leverage, when acquisition is a problem, you have to go and tackle something that is high leverage, like, and you often have to take action fast.
Mm,
I think it's important to define what is a problem. Like a problem is I used to have 20% net margins and now I have 5 and I'm sad about it. That's like a problem, but you're not going to go bankrupt.
yeah.
Probably not. the on the far extreme, it's like I'm losing money. When you are losing money, you want to take action like today. And I just said that like the natural inclination is to go and press buttons. Don't take that type of action. Like adjust OPEX. You know what that means. And then additionally, start testing things that actually have the chance of moving the needle. Your offer, and essentially that's all that matters. If you don't get a winning offer that can produce positive contribution margin dollars, then it's game over. And it's rare that media buying and creative alone is the solution, unless it's like a marginal loss. Sometimes if like you're really close, creative can provide that 10% bump, but it's rare that it's going to provide that 20 or 30% bump. So it's just being very diligent and having discipline around what to do and what not to do. I'd say that's I've been victim of this too, like where I'm
Yeah.
not happy with something and I want to go and like make changes on a million different things. And as I've been doing this for longer, I've learned that like it's not productive. You actually want to take the time to think about what do I actually want to impact here? Because I've learned that poorly thought out actions across a bunch of different stuff that you can't isolate well usually results in more chaos and going backwards than it does going forwards.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I agree, man. And I will say too that like a lot of times when you're in that far side of the spectrum where you're talking about like you're losing money, like the company's losing money,
Yeah.
the ad buying, I think in my experience is something that operators and founders like to touch because they think, I mean, I can't tell you how often I get the question of like, well, how much revenue would I need to scale us out of this issue? I get asked that a lot when a brand is losing money, and I'm like, Uh, very rarely is that a problem or very rarely is that the solution, because if that was the solution, I probably would have approved us to scale ad spend further sooner than this, so that this never became a problem in the first place. Like if I saw room for our CAC to go up, like there's times when I do our CFO audit, and this is maybe 50% of the time I do the CFO audit. I actually love these. These ones are really fun. I'm like, hey, you guys aren't spending enough. I like have a lot of confidence that you're not spending enough. Like I think you should talk to your ad buying team, and we can help model some of this to give everyone confidence. But like you're leaving money on the table. You should be spending more. So we as CFOs in the D2C space are looking for opportunity to do that. Usually, if a brand is struggling with their marketing to the point where the company's losing money, usually there's not unit economics there that we feel comfortable approving further ad spend, because the unit economics are broken, right? Yeah. And they might be broken at the gross margin level, or they might be broken at the contribution margin level, but somewhere they're broken, and we actually need to scale back potentially, or hold the line where we're at and re-engineer, retreat, reconfigure. Yeah. But what can you do below that line on the P&L is you can scoop out overhead and get rid of it to try to increase runway, reduce burn, that kind of a situation,
What do you think is the worst thing brand founders can do when acquisition is a problem? Like, I'm sure that you see a lot of that too when they come to you with issues.
I honestly, dude, it's scale further. I mean, and I know that sounds crazy to you because you're a growth marketer, but I see a lot of brand founders who they haven't dug into their numbers enough to see that it's broken at the order level, at the unit level. And you can't, if you scale something that's broken there, you're just scaling the brokenness, right? But I would say maybe the second most destructive thing you can do is not go immediately look at what moves you can make to increase how much time you have that you can survive to fix the problem, right? I had a brand that I was working with. We were doing an exercise to figure out how much cash should they hold, what should be their minimum cash balance. And one exercise I do is game out okay, if Facebook stopped working, what would we do? Let's not even talk numbers. Who do you need on the team? What resources do we need to keep paying for to try to figure out how to unbreak it, how to get it working again, right? And he's like, well, I would fire everybody. He's like, it would suck, but I would fire everybody except for my VP of marketing, because for him, his VP of marketing was his media buyer, right? Yeah. And so I would keep our VP of marketing. If it got really bad, I would ask him if he could go down to a part-time consultant, right? I would keep these couple people. And he even was like, sorry, Jon, I would aggressively negotiate how much I'm paying you to just give me the minimum cash model that I need to stay alive. And so I was like, okay, cool. So he's like, I cut ad spend back to 0. And we just live off of our LTV, piggy bank for the moment. And so I went through and I kind of modeled all that out, and we're like, all right, here. And he's like, I go, well, how much time do you want to figure this out? He's like, 6 months. If I can't figure it out in 6 months, we're not going to figure it out. And so I went through and I calculated what 6 months of that capital was. I was like, it's this number. He's like, all right, I'll make sure we always have at least that much money in the bank. And that was, so we had a bit of a contingency plan, but that's the reality. If you're in that situation, you might have to do something like that, So,
that makes total sense. Do you have any final takes?
Look, this may sound simple, but I'm finding time and time again with brand founders that it's not widely known and widely used. Make sure you're measuring new customer profitability, or the profitability of acquisition, separately from the profitability of retention or returning customers. That's the first place to start. If you're not doing that, you can't assess if acquisition is a problem. And so make sure you're doing that, make sure you're working with a finance team and a marketing team who understand how to report in that manner, and then understand what to do with it. What about you, man? What are your final thoughts?
When there's an issue with acquisition, make sure you communicate with your team in a way where you're making it clear that you want to have an open dialogue about if if everyone collectively agrees that the thing you're solving for has a chance of being high enough leverage to actually, yield the outcome that you want. Like when you have a lot of like these like bad outcome or like urgent meetings where you're going through all these like things that are not going well, oftentimes on a human level, you can kind of have people contribute ideas that are just ideas, and you want to be very very clear that like if you want to be very very clear that you want to make sure that what you go and pursue to try and fix the issue has a chance of bridging that gap. Oftentimes little tweaks here and there are almost just like distractions. If you want to get meaningfully different results, you have to try meaningfully different things, not small little tweaks. There's obviously exceptions, but I think that that is oftentimes where you can get into kind of a time waste zone. You want to tackle hard problems and make big changes.
Man, I totally agree, and I think that's where we wrap this thing, man. This was a good discussion, and I'm sure it's going to be useful for all of our listeners. So that's a wrap.